But you know the old saying, right? Success has so many fathers, but failure is an orphan. And obviously, the withdrawal of Afghanistan, this is a failure of the modern age for sure. And this failure, most definitely, it does really feel kind of like an orphan, right? Nobody wants to own it, except everybody wants to pin it on Trump without recognizing the timeline of when Trump did what and when he actually ended any kind of negotiations. And by the way, that was back even before the Camp David meeting, when the Taliban had been accused and when they rightfully, when they admitted to carrying out a terror attack in Kabul that resulted in 11 fatalities, including 1 U.S. soldier. Even Joe Biden did everything that he could in his speech not to own his own disaster. He was the one who extended the timeline. He was the one who pushed it back to September for this bizarre 9/11 optic. But as this debacle unfolded over the weekend and the past few days, you might have noticed someone else who has not been present at all, so a pretty important figure. In fact, it's Vice President Kamala Harris. She's just been missing entirely. Vice President Harris hasn't come anywhere near this administration-defining moment. Why? That's kind of the question I want to explore in this segment. So where is the vice president? I mean, so far we have exactly 2 tweets from Vice President Kamala Harris regarding the catastrophe in Afghanistan. That's it. That's Vice President Harris's contribution to the dire situation. You remember, the last person in the room. Let's take a look at those tweets, in fact. Tweet number 1, this was on August 16th. And you can see it. Quote, "For 2 decades, our courageous service members put their lives on the line in Afghanistan. We will always be grateful and proud. Ending U.S. military involvement in Afghanistan is the right decision," end quote. So grateful and proud that they thought they would pull out in a manner that would just absolutely dishonor the work that so many have put into decentralizing the Taliban, to just kind of steamroll over the sacrifices that so many had made. Our soldiers that have sacrificed so much. Is that what she meant by that? But on to tweet number 2 from the vice president, which reads, quote, "We went to Afghanistan almost 20 years ago. Now our mission is to get our people, our allies, and our vulnerable Afghans to safety outside of the country," end quote. Did they do that? I mean, if they were so concerned about getting people to safety, probably leaving without a moment's notice or any, kind of advance warning was not the way to do it, right, Vice President? I just got to point out, too, imagine the tone deafness of tweeting about getting our people out of Afghanistan safely when we already know that an orderly and safe withdrawal is impossible at this point. But there's clearly not going to be a safe exit. But the vice president tweets about getting people out safely anyway. It's weird. We have images of people so desperate to get out of Afghanistan that they clung to the outside of U.S. military aircraft and fell to their deaths from the wheel wells. Exiting safely, that left the building a long time ago. But that's kind of typical of the last person in the room, super important but totally MIA vice president. There is a certain tone deafness and an awkwardness always on display from the way that she handles these situations, particularly when times are hard and questions tough. Now, according to a couple of different stories out there are multiple reports. Harris was asked to address the American people this past Sunday about the unraveling situation in Afghanistan, but she refused. Sources say that she blurted out, she was overheard screaming, quote, "They will not pin this redacted on me," end quote. Now that was quick. So from, quote, "I'll be the last person in the room," to "They will not pin this bleep on me," end quote, right? So here's what the vice president wants you to know on her Twitter feed as of a couple of hours ago. That the coronavirus vaccines are safe, free, highly effective, but she retweeted this. "They're highly effective vaccines, blah, 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 blah. CDC, yes, the CDC is announcing a new plan for booster shots. That's great. Can we talk about the thousands of Americans that have been abandoned in Kabul?" So she'll be over there telling everyone to get vaccinated, and the president can handle the Afghanistan disaster. She was the last person in the room, and they really, really, really inflated her involvement in this, but she'll take vax detail. This is kind of all par for the course because the vice president is entirely tone deaf on this, and she doesn't seem to be particularly loyal. She never really did going into this partnership. But yes, there's one thing that you can say. Kamala Harris is very, very motivated by however she can advance herself, and it's very calculated. Very much so. So whether it's her accusations of her behavior in California, climbing the political ladder, playing the victim card, social justice warrioring, very ambitious in the extreme. Kind of reminds me of Hillary Clinton in a way. Now, one very good reason that she might be staying away from all of this as far as possible is that she can't afford to own 1 inch of this Afghanistan disaster. I think she obviously has further political ambitions when Joe Biden's out of office. And not just because she's already terribly unpopular, but also because the presidency is suddenly looking very, very wobbly. Nobody can pretend at this point that Biden does not look lost and tired half the time. I am the furthest person away from conspiracy theories, and I do not entertain this stuff. I don't have, honestly, a lot of patience for anything that's not fact or that hasn't been vetted or really genuine, driven by curiosity, even some innocent speculation that's not just making statements and begging the question. But when leaders are this MIA, when leaders are this non-transparent, people are going to speculate. There were always rumors that that whole old Joe from Scranton shtick, that was not only just a Trojan horse for a very unpopular socialist political agenda. There were a lot of people wondering if it was a way to cloak an agenda to install a very unpopular successor, the vice president. I mean, why else would the Democrat machine choose such an unlikable candidate to be VP and protect her, keep her away from everything, even when it was her responsibility? Unless if they needed an insurance plan in case Biden was unable to fulfill his duties in the White House. Of course, this is all conjecture, but you do have to wonder. There's another reason why Vice President Harris won't go near this political IED called Afghanistan. If she were to one day be president, she needs to appear as the fixer in Afghanistan, right? She has to be looked at as the person with a solution. And so in other words, you can't be the fixer if the public sees you as the cause of the problem. So she needs to stay far away from Afghanistan and far away from that room she claims that she'll be the last one in, faithfully supporting her failing boss, President Biden. Because at some point, she may need to be positioned as the solution to all the problems that her boss caused. Now, again, this is complete speculation. But one thing to watch will be an interview that Biden's going to be doing with George Stephanopoulos on ABC. This is happening tomorrow, according to White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. Very interesting choice of interview. Now, George Stephanopoulos, he's a good interviewer. I know because I've done election coverage with him and I've also been interviewed by him in the wake of Parkland. But he's also, let's never forget, he was a Democrat operative. He shaped campaigns from the Clintons. And then, of course, as many operatives do, they end up somehow as anchors and working in the news. But he's gotten critical interviews that helped Obama's core messages out during his administration's tenure. So it's going to be interesting to watch how this interview goes tomorrow. It'll be interesting to see whether or not Stephanopoulos gives a tough interview to Biden, kind of forcing him out, or whether he's going to approach him in kind of a rehabilitation way, right? Trying to salvage Biden's presidency, helping to spread the blame around, laying it all on Trump or the Afghan army, like Biden did during his speech just a couple of days ago. So again, I think that this interview is going to be worth watching just to see how it plays out, because it's going to be critical in defining the narrative around Afghanistan going forward for this administration. In any case, this foreign policy disaster is the kind of thing that destroys a presidency. And you can imagine that some of the Democrat leadership are wondering if Afghanistan is going to destroy this one. Now, if that were to happen, they would need to activate a highly unpopular VP to assume control of a sinking ship. Now, again, speculation, but if that were to happen at some point in the future, Vice President Kamala Harris, she might actually long for the days where she could hide out from all the storms, from all of the angles, only 7 months into this administration. Only tweets aren't going to be enough to deflect all the questions, and neither will her trying to laugh it off. If Kamala Harris were ever to one day assume the presidency, she would instead discover, just as Biden has in the last couple of days, that when you know what hits the fan, there's no leaving the room and there's nowhere to hide.